also known as Fico. And also with us now, John Olsheimer, President of Consumer Education for Credit.com. So, Mark, here's a question that's a big elephant in the room. I have to ask you first. With all of the credit card companies especially changing terms on us on our credit cards, that affects our scores. So the masses are really wondering, what can we do to protect our scores in times like this?
You do the same things that you always do, and there's 4 or 5 factors that we'll look at in particular. Have you paid off your bills on time? So don't be late on any payments. Are you close to the max? So if the terms are changing on you, you want to make sure you're not pushing the limits of your credit lines. You also want to make sure that you have long-standing relationships with credit card companies. Switching around from card to card is typically a bad thing.
Right.
And then finally, do you look at a balance of different kinds of credit that you manage well? Credit cards, mortgages, auto loans. If you demonstrate your ability to pay off different types of debt, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, this is probably the first time this has really happened, right, to consumers, that something that's outside of their control is changing their score. So we're all kind of learning along with this model. John, and I know that, sometimes we have to advise people to open new lines of credit to maintain their score.
Yeah, the rules have been set in opposition now. What we've been taught for the past 15, 20 years. When I was at Fair Isaac, we were telling people to do certain things, and now it seems like some of those things aren't necessarily the wisest move right now. So we are having to scramble a little bit and advise consumers to either pay down balances more aggressively than they were in the past, or even open new lines of credit just to show that you do have open to buy and availability.
That's right. You don't want to beat the max on all your available lines, that's for sure.
Definitely. That'll keep your score down. Now, John, you also have a question for Mark.
Absolutely. Look, for the first time in the past 20 years, we hear the term short sale all the time now when it comes to getting out of a mortgage. Settling credit card debt versus, say, going through debt management or bankruptcy. All of these options that we're hearing about now that are becoming more and more aggressively marketed to consumers all have some sort of negative impact to our score. So how in the world do we get out of this crushing amount of debt that we're caught in without taking that 7-year hit to the FICO score, because it's so important?
Well, let's be clear about the thing you don't want to have happen. You don't want to go to foreclosure, because if you've foreclosed on your house, that's a 7-year blemish on your score. And if you're a high-scoring individual, up in the upper end of the range, which goes up to 850, you could see your score come down by as much as 200 points. So what you want to do is you want to enter in some sort of negotiated settlement where the bank feels that they got their just dues, and they'll report to the credit bureaus that they've been satisfied. It's really what the credit bureaus understand from the banks that goes into our scores. If the credit bureau reports that the bank has been satisfied, you're good. But if the credit bureau understands from the bank that you foreclosed, that's a bad hit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in this time, more than ever, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this is the time where we're seeing a changing credit climate so much that we have to scramble to keep up with the changing rules, and part of that is the short selling and the credit card companies' change of business.
I'll tell you how you do that. That's exactly right. So this is an era where consumers are meant to be sort of in charge of their own finances. Take charge here. Visit our website. myfico.com has all the rules of the road as we understand them from the credit bureaus and credit issuers. And we've also got some great simulators there. You can go and see what the different effects would be of different kinds of actions or inactions you would take on your score. So myfico.com is a place to learn more about that.
And it's really important to understand what goes into your score, and we showed that graphic earlier as to what makes up how your score is calculated. Let's head to Pennsylvania, where Carol is on the money line. Carol, what's on your mind?
Hi, Carmen. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I have a question about what I heard you refer to before as a zombie account. I had always prided myself on my good credit and paying my bills on time, and I always take those obligations very seriously. And then at one point in 2006, I filed a change of address from the post office, and apparently not all of my mail was forwarded. So near the end of 2007, I got a phone call from a collection agency regarding a clothing store account that had a balance of approximately $275. I had honestly forgotten about it. I paid the bill while I was speaking to them on the phone. They reported it to the credit bureau as paid, but it's still showing, on all my credit reports in glaring red.
Yeah.
And my credit history has always been great, and this upsets me so much. Is there any way to get this negative information removed from my credit reports?
Well, Carol, probably can't get rid of it, but I'm like you. I really hate when the zombie debt shows up. That happened to me about 10 years ago. It's just this walking dead of debt that you just didn't know you have. John, but in terms of Carol's recovery.
Right. Well, there's good news and there's bad news. So here's the silver lining. The silver lining is it sounds like, anyways, that you have compensated for that negative piece of information with years and years and years of solid credit management history. And that actually is going to help you greatly. Here's the dilemma that you're running into. Unless the collection item is inaccurate or doesn't belong to you, or if the collection agency goes out of business and they can't verify the item, then it does stay on your credit report for the statute of limitations length, which is 7 years. Just make sure that when you're reviewing the collection on your credit report that it shows the original date that it was sent to collections as being an accurate date, because that's the date that the credit reporting agencies use to purge that information after the 7-year period runs.
And Carmen, there's another bit of good news for her. The latest version of the FICO score, what's called FICO 08, rolling out in the market now, actually takes some kind light on that situation where it's an isolated incident, right? We don't ding the scores as much for that one-off mistake that was made as we did in the past. So I think she'll be okay, but I agree with John. Go back to the credit bureaus and see if they can't get the blemish removed altogether. From the
Let me ask you a question related to that, Mark. Should you then, if you get a notice from a collection agency, should you go back to the original creditor and pay them directly as opposed to through the credit collection agency?
Whatever way is most sure to get the blemish removed from the credit bureau file, right? So if you have confidence in the collector, fine. Otherwise, go back to the original credit issuer.
And the dilemma that you run into there, Rick, is that sometimes the collection agency has actually purchased the debt from the original creditor, and so the original creditor has essentially washed their hands of it, and you don't have a relationship with them any longer. You have it now with the collection agency. You've got to deal with them.
Pay where the bill's coming from. But Mark, this brings up a point that Carol was mentioning about the zombie debt. You mentioned credit history. Let's just make it clear to everybody for once and for all that you have to be actually a certain age to have a perfect credit score, because we get folks calling all the time in their 20s, 30s, and 40s and saying, I cannot get a perfect credit score. This is driving me insane. Why not?
No, you're exactly right. You have to build that history over time. But there is something that, for new credit entrants into the marketplace, people, college graduates and so on, there's something called authorized user. If you attach yourself to mom or dad's account, and they have good credit standing, that helps you build credit standing in your own right more quickly than if you were just on your own.
That's good to know, but you cannot get a perfect score till you're at least, what, 50-something?
40s,
somewhere around
probably,
there? 40s, late 40s? All right, so be in no rush. Thank you so much, Carol. Jennifer in Virginia, you're on the money line. Talk to us.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I just sold my home and will receive about $12,000 from that sale, but I have about $10,000 in credit card debt, all basically at their limits. And I need to know how to raise my FICO score in order to get the best rates for my next mortgage.
And Jennifer, are you currently employed? Do you have income?
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know, because John, I think we can all agree on what she needs to do.
This is the no-brainer of the century. if you have $10,000 of credit card debt and most of your cards are close to their credit limit, you are absolutely killing your credit score, even though it's only $10,000. Take that $12,000. I think the certified financial planners on the set will agree that you really don't have $12,000 when you have $10,000 in credit card debt, and knock out those accounts. But here you go. Here's the twist. Do not close the accounts, because you're not going to do yourself any good. Pay it off. Check your scores in 30 to 60 days at myfico.com, and you'll see exactly how much that's going to help you.
Real quick, I mean, think about this for a minute. I'm looking at this, and it shows 24%, 15% credit card debt. Listen, if I could offer you a guaranteed, tax-free 24 or 15% return, you'd be jumping all over it. So absolutely pay this off. Even if it didn't help your credit score, it's a guaranteed return double-digit, which we're not getting anywhere near in CDs, bank accounts, or certainly the stock market.
I think what Jennifer's pointing out, Jennifer, you're pointing out how debt utilization plays a big part in your credit score, right, Mark?
That's right. It's the second most weighted factor. It's not only how much money you owe, but how much it is in proportion to the total lines available to you. And you don't want to be out near the end of that. So pay it off, realize benefits to your score, and certainly financial benefits as well.
Now, how quickly, Jennifer, I want to find out for you, how quickly can her score go up to the point where, if she pays all of this off, how quickly will it go up?
A matter of weeks. It depends how promptly the merchants report it back to the credit bureaus, but typically a couple of weeks, at most 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
Great, Jennifer. You can see that go up quite a bit. Now, before we say goodbye to Dr. Green, we got to ask you, of course got to ask you, what's your score?
Well, funny you should ask. I just looked it up the other day. I'm fortunate. I have a pretty good score. It's 795. There's a couple of things that I do well. I have long-standing relationships with the credit issuers. I pay off my bills on time. I have diversified holdings across different types of credit. I do have a fair amount of revolving balances. We've done some home repairs and so on, so that's why I'm not up in the 800s. But 795, I'll take it.
I'm so glad to hear you say that it was below 800, because that's me too. And I like to explain to people it's because if you use, I use credit cards for convenience, right? So if you check in at any point during the month before I pay the bill, which I pay off in full, by the way, every month, you will see how much I'm using, and that keeps me below 800.
Exactly right. So the average in America these days is around 720. Anything north of the mid-700s is a good score. You and me both.
Okay.
South of the mid-600s, not so good.
So what's an excellent score these days? Above what?
Well, it used to be 740, 760 is probably 780, somewhere like that. It depends on the particular bank these days, but mid-700s would be considered a good score.
Okay, next time we have more time, we're going to go around everyone's credit score. All right, thank you so much, Mark Green. Thank you, John Alzheimer. John's will be back for tonight's Web Extra. He's exposing 3